In this section, we will work on the windows and doors, and we need some lightweight chipboard. So on page 3, there's a section labeled lightweight chipboard, and the section under windows and doors lists all these different pieces of lightweight chipboard that we need. And I'll show you, if you have punches that are the correct sizes here, they're listed here, I'll show you the best way to use those to cut the circles. If you don't, then I'll talk about how to cut those circles the easiest way. So that's our lightweight chipboard that we need. We'll also need a piece of plastic. If you have spare packaging plastic, or probably be some glare on this. This is just a sheet of thin plastic that I have. That's what's on the cutting guide. Then we need a couple pages from our templates to cut the window and door frames. This page that's called Window and Door Frame Templates, we'll need that. And then when we go to place our mullions, you ignore this part at the top, it's about the steps, and we'll get to those later. But down here, this section will help us place some little mullions on some of the windows. So those are the pieces that we need from the templates. Also, there's a separate file called Haunted Mansion Doors and Windows, and that you can print off on 2 pages of, this is just cream or off-white cardstock. I like that better than stark white for the paper I'm using. And we'll cut these out, and I'll show you how to do that later. And then we'll also need some decorative paper for the single doors and the front door, as well as some of the windows do not have lights behind them, so I had 12 by 12 pieces of my cream cardstock, so these are just the leftovers that I'll use for that. What else do I have out here? A black magic marker to darken. I want these frames to be black, so I'll just use a black magic marker to do that. I'm going to color my window panes with some alcohol inks, and I have a couple of different browns and a black and a slate out here, whatever you like. And then here, just some little bling to use for doorknobs, 1/8 inch for the small doors, and a bigger one for the front door. So I think that's it as far as materials go. So let's get started. So first we'll cut our window and door frames using this template, and just so I can get my punches out of the way, I'll cut my circular window frames first. Now, if you have punches, the way to do this is to first cut the center, and the center is where it says ID, that stands for inside diameter. So for the large ones, we need 3 of those, and the inside diameter is 1 1/2 inches. So I'm going to take my 1 1/2 inch punch here, and I'll just make sure I can see some. There's going to be at least 1/8 of an inch border on all sides, so I'm going to punch that inside diameter, and then this one got a little close down here, so I might have to do this again, but you'll get the idea here. And then for the outside diameter, it's 1 3/4, and now we can just take that and center it so that you get the chipboard equally all around. And if I'd done a better job cutting the first one out, that creates your frame for the window. And we need 3 of the large ones, and I already did the small one where we just need the inside diameter is 1 1/8, and then once you've got that cut, the outside diameter is 1 3/8, and so there's our little ring like that. Now if you don't have punches that are all these sizes, you can use a circle template. Just first draw the inside diameter, and using a sharp blade, just take your time and cut that inside diameter, and then center the circle template with the outside diameter, and you can use scissors if you want to cut the outside, or again use a craft knife. So that's how to cut the circular frames. Now we're ready to cut out our rectangular window and door frames, and you can see I've done it for each one example of each. And don't worry down here with the door frames, they'll want to spring out a little bit, but we will have a backing on them that will keep them nice and square. So anyway, we cut our lightweight chipboard to begin with, the proper size here, and so now we just need to cut the frames, and let's look at what it says here. On the windows, the top is always 1/8 of an inch, and all the verticals are 1/8 of an inch, even this one in the center over here. And then the bottom is always 1/4 of an inch. And so the way I like to do that, let me just do, I'll do one of these doubles as an example, is I take that and put it over here on my gridded mat, and I get it lined up in a grid section. And first I just use a pencil to mark the 1/8 inch on the top, and I move my ruler over here so that these are 2 inches tall, so that I can draw the 1/4 inch from the bottom. So my ruler is at 1 3/4 inches. And then I can turn it around. If you're more comfortable drawing the verticals in first, you can go ahead and do that. But what I'll use these 2 horizontal lines as a stopping point and a starting point for each of my verticals. And first I'll just line up my ruler on the 1/8 mark, and I'm holding it down pretty tightly. And let me make sure I have a good sharp chipboard, X-Acto blade in there. It's a lot easier when you do that. And then our diagram says we'll move over the space is 1 inch, so I'm actually lining up my ruler at 1 1/8 inches, and I'm starting at that top 1/8 and coming down to that 1/4. I'm trying not to go past my lines because there's not a lot of play in there. And then I'll move my ruler over to 1 1/4 inches, which gives me the other side of that central part. And then if I come all the way down here to 2 1/4 inches, I can do my final one. And I don't know if you notice that when I move my ruler, I'm holding down the chipboard with the point of my knife here, so this isn't sliding around. It makes my life easier. And then I can turn it this way, again get it lined up on my mat, and my top is 1/8 of an inch, so I'll line up my 1/8 of an inch. Now I have to remember to stop right here where that center one is, and if you can't quite see it, just take a pencil and darken that up, and then come down and start there. And then again I'm using the point of my X-Acto blade to hold this in place, and coming down to 1 3/4 inches, and again cutting those 2 sides. Now you may need to come and clean up a corner if you don't get right to the edge, but that's an easy way to cut those. Now when we do a door, let's do this other double door. We only need to draw an 1/8 of an inch at the top, and make sure, especially with this double door, the 2 3/8 is the width and the 2 1/2 is the height. So I'll go ahead and I'll mark that 1/8 of an inch for the top. And now I'll bring this over here. And it's basically the same as what we did for the double windows. First we'll do an 1/8 of an inch. But because there's no bottom, when you get down here near the end, make sure you're holding over here again with your craft knife, because we don't have a connected bottom piece here to keep everything in line. So I'm putting some good pressure on my ruler, and again now I'm taking my point of my blade and making sure that this piece of chipboard on the right is right up next to the ruler, and then I can move over my 1/8 of an inch, do that next piece, and again I'm holding down this piece of chipboard and coming over here till I get to my 2 1/4 mark. I can get that last one, and then I'll just turn and make sure, probably mark this little center here so I make sure that I don't cut that when I turn it this way. And then come across. Oops. Yeah, see, you have to be very careful that you're holding it down steadily. There we go. And again, clean up any corners that you may need to. If something breaks off, we can always put some tape on the back, so don't get concerned about it. And again, don't worry if this is splaying out a little bit at the bottom. So, and then for the front door frame, the only thing that's different is that this is a little, the sides and the top are 1/4 inch instead of an 1/8 of an inch. So I'll go ahead and get all of my rectangular frames cut, and then after I do that, I'll use my black marker to blacken the front and the edges of each of the pieces. So I have all of my frames on my page here. I've blackened all the edges, and for the next thing you might want to put on a book on tape or something you can listen to, because we want to add some score tape to the back of each one of these frames. So I'll go ahead and get that accomplished. Next we're going to cut out these pieces of cream cardstock that go inside of the windows, and to make my life a little bit easier as far as putting score tape on the back of them, I'm not going to cut them all out individually to begin with. I'm going to cut them into blocks of similar sizes, and I'll do that and then I'll be back to show you what I mean. So this is what I mean by the sections. I guess they're kind of rows, and I just have left them all in a row. And now if I line it up here on my craft mat, first I'm going to cut the openings, but I'll just cut the left ones, and then I can easily see where to stop and start. And I'll cut the left ones going across and then flip it around and cut the other ones. So I'll do that on this section, and then I'll be back. So I've made all of the vertical cuts for the openings. I haven't made, obviously, any of the cuts that separate the windows. And now I'm just going to turn it on so I can do the top and see it, and then I'll turn it around and do each of the bottoms of the openings. So I have the openings in this strip cut, and one other thing that can speed things up is I'm going to run a strip of 1/8 inch tape all the way across the top and 1/4 all the way across the bottom, and then I won't have to do that individually for each piece. And now I'll cut them apart. Now when they're score tape, it's a little bit slippery, it wants to slip around. So what I found to do is to of course hold down tight, and then the other thing is to not try to do it all in one pass, just to hold tight and make a couple of light passes, and then that score tape won't slip around on you. So I'll finish doing that and then prepping my other edges here and doing all my rectangular windows. And then if you have the correct size of punches, you don't have to use these templates that are here for the ones for the circular windows. You can cut out the circles much like we did with the chipboard. They just have a different size of inside diameter than the chipboard did. So we'll need 3 of the large ones and 1 of the small one. And I should say that if you do that, I would just use some of the blank leftover chipboard. Don't try to punch right on these lines. You probably won't. It's very tricky and to be successful that way. What we're ending up with here is a 3/16 inch border. So here are all the cream cardstock pieces cut, and they have score tape on the back. And before I punched the cardstock circles, I just put score tape on the back so that I could have a nice ring of score tape on the back of those cardstocks. And you can see I've just stacked them up here on top of my templates for this, just to keep everything organized. Some of our windows do not have lights behind them. They go right up against a wall, and so that they will look better, we'll cut some pieces of cream cardstock to go behind those windows. And we need 4 at 1 by 2, 1 at 1 1/4 by 2, 2 at 2 3/8 by 2, and 1 that is a 1 3/4 inch circle. And before I punched this circle, I put score tape on the back and then punched it. And then all of these pieces have been also prepped with score tape around their edges. We also want to create some mullions in some of the windows, and so I've taken a strip of my cardstock here. I've put a 1/2 inch. I think that'll be sufficient. I want to cut 6 pieces that are 1/16 by 12, and I'll just use my ruler and carefully with a sharp craft knife I'll cut those 6 strips. Next we need some decorative paper for the doors, or at least the single doors. The double doors are going to be more like French doors. And we need 4 at 1 1/4 by 2 1/2. And then this last one that's 1 3/4 by 2 3/4, that's the front door, and I haven't decided yet what to make that out of, so I'm going to hold off on doing the front door. And then all of these, of course, have been backed with score tape. Now for the windows, I've cut a piece of plastic that is 9 inches by 12 inches, and I'm going to use a combination of alcohol inks on my little dauber over here. And when I finish, I'll tell you what colors I used, because I'm not positive which colors I'm going to use right now. But I'll just dab all over this and then I'll be back. So this is my sheet, and I used caramel, espresso, and slate. I didn't want it to get too dark because I remember for the windows that we have lights behind, we already kind of darkened the tracing paper that is in those windows. And if we need to darken it up for windows that don't have lights behind, that's a simple matter, just to add maybe some more slate or something on the back side. So now I will cut the plastic in accordance with the cutting guide where it says plastic down in this section. Now that we have all of our plastic shapes cut, we're ready to do some mullion placement, and we'll do that on all of the rectangular shapes. The circular shapes don't get any mullions. And so this page that we saw at the beginning of this section at the bottom has window mullion placement diagrams. And let's first look at the double doors. So the double doors should fit right exactly in that template, and you might want to just anchor it down a little bit with some blue tape. And then we'll take our mullions, and we can see through here. See if I can show you on the video without the glare. I think you can see how you can see the lines through here. And we'll just first put our 2 verticals on and then the 3 horizontals. And I just use a sharp craft knife blade to trim off the mullions even with the end of the plastic. Probably the trickiest thing to this is to get that score tape backing started off of the ends of these skinny strips. But once you do, just pull that backing out of the way and start lining up the strip on your template, and then use the craft knife to cut it off. So there's the mullion placement on the double doors, and I'll repeat that for the second double door. And then once you've got the mullions put on, go ahead and remove the score tape backing from the appropriate cardstock frame and stick that on at this point. And of course you'll want to give everything a good burnish. So for the windows, we kind of have an one size fits all shape here because all the windows are 2 inches in height and we're only putting a horizontal mullion in. So just line up the plastic on the left here and put that mullion down. And then before I take it away, I like to put the frame on because this little mullion is not exactly in the center here, and it's closer to the top to allow for the thickness of this piece of the cardstock that's 1/4 of an inch here. So that I'll just go ahead and attach the cardstock right after I put the mullion on. That way I'll make sure I don't get any of my windows oriented incorrectly. And then for the double windows, that plastic will fit right inside that shape, and I recommend, especially for the double ones, to use some tape to hold it in place in the corners like we did for the doors while you stretch that long mullion all the way across. So now I've attached all the mullions and the cardstock frames to all of my pieces of plastic, and I made sure to burnish everything well. And then I think you can see that I've separated them into 2 groups. On the left side I have 4 single windows, 1 of the wide windows, 1 of the large circular windows, and 2 of the double windows. and then on the right side is everything else. Now these on the left side, they do not go by any openings, so we need to take each one and prep the edges thoroughly with score tape all the way around. And for this circular window, you can just take your time and kind of work your way around with the 1/8 inch score tape. And then on the right side, for all of the rectangular ones, we'll again prep the edges with score tape, but I think you can see here that I've left the corners open, and that's because I want to have a place to add some glossy accents for some extra security when I attach these to the building. And the circular windows, I'm not putting any score tape around. I'll just attach those with glossy accents when we're ready to do that. So that's the prep for the plastic. Now to assemble our windows. All the windows on the left side here have cardstock that we previously cut and prepped with score tape that gets added to the back. It should fit exactly. And after we do that, we can remove the score tape backing from our chipboard frame and put that assembly together. And then on the right side, these are all the windows that go in front of openings, so obviously there isn't any cardstock to go behind them, so it's just a simple matter of removing the score tape and attaching the frames to the front. So I'll go ahead and get that accomplished. So here are all the windows and the French doors put together. And after I put them together, I took my black magic marker and went around the edges to make sure that there wasn't any of the edges of the cardstock showing. And so now these windows are ready to be set aside and can go in the project when they're needed. I'll keep the doors aside for a minute because when I finish the other doors, we'll put some doorknobs on. Now for our single doors, we'll just add our cream cardstock and use the decorative paper to make sure that the legs of your frames don't get splayed out. So we'll add the cream cardstock and then add the chipboard on top of there, and do that for all 4 single doors. And then I still haven't decided what I'm going to do for the decorative paper for my entrance doors, so at this point I'll just put the frame and the cardstock together here and set that aside. I've completed making my doors, and I added a little bling here about 1 inch up from the bottom to act as the doorknobs, and then on the French doors, before I put the bling on, I cut a couple of little 1/8 inch wide strips of cardstock backed with score tape, just to give the doorknob something to hold on to there and not just be on the glass. I've also made 3 templates that will help me get the windows in place correctly, and 3 templates and then this one little spacer, I should say. So on each one of these, it's cut with a 1/2 inch wide here, and then the distance to the notch on the first one is 3 5/16, 3 5/16. And on the second one, the distance from the bottom to the notch is 7 inches, 7 inches. And the last one, the distance from the bottom to the notch is 10 11/16, 10 11/16. And then this little spacer over here is 13/16 high. That's a 1/16 of an inch higher than or more than 3/4 of an inch. And that we'll use for the bottom of our first floor doors. I know it took some time to complete all the steps to make these doors and windows, but I think it's details like this that can really make a project special.